Come on up. I'll just put this down here. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous because Fujoshi stuff, but you might not also know because not a lot of people know what this is or like what a Fujoshi is and like what type of content Fujoshi engage with. So I'm super glad and excited to be able to present aspects of my honors thesis today. I can't talk about everything because it's like a 100-page paper. But I'm going to talk about a lot of my own experiences with BL, and I'll explain what that is in a second. And I am also going to explain essentially what I have been doing for the past year, and is essentially applying literary analysis to BL, and also how I kind of interact with people on TikTok about that since like December of last year. So to start out, and just so I can get this ball rolling, oh, I just want to go through the background of how I even like wanted to like start doing academic pursuits of BL. And a lot of that started with the fact that I did a lot of past BL research in classes. And the first instance of that was in Professor Strand's Japanese contemporary popular culture class, where there was a week 11 where it was M for mature. And she had BL on there, and my little like hidden Fujoshi self like perked up a little bit and was like, "Ooh, BL! I can talk about BL for a presentation. Let me do that." And I was able to do that, and it was super fun in order to get to know the academic pursuits of BL. And then I was also able to do another presentation in her Japan illuminated class where I looked at previous scholarship of BL and applied that to current stories of BL because I saw in the first research that I did that a lot of stuff didn't match up what I was seeing in the current state of BL research and BL culture on like Twitter, on like TikTok, was not matching up with what I saw scholars talking about in like 2015. So I wanted to kind of compare and contrast that. And then I was able to also talk about BL in terms of gendered language in Japanese. And I did that in Nishi Sensei's Japanese language and society class, which was really fun. And just to talk about my goals for the thesis, essentially, I made this thesis not just as an academic paper, but more so as a guide for fans like myself who want to learn more about BL, and especially for academics who are coming into this space not knowing what BL is. There's a lot of BL research since the 90s. The 90s is when BL research started, so it's a fairly young genre in pursuits of academia, but in those pursuits, a lot of the research is centered in Japan, which makes sense because BL originally started in Japan, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but it has expanded so far and wide to Korea, to China, to Thailand, to even the West. The West doesn't really have a BL space, but it's starting to develop. And I really wanted to let academics know that like things are changing so rapidly, and you can't just go to the same like cited research every single time, because every single time I go to an academic scholar article, I see James Welker. Love James Welker. I think his work is great, but he focuses on a different aspect of Fujoshi and fandom. So when you're coming into Anglophone fandom and English-speaking fandom, you can't just talk about people in Japan. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't align. So I wanted to make this guide for them. So before I even start, again, I need to talk about the current worries and the current undertones that are underneath this thesis. And it's the fact that there are a lot of LGBT books being banned in the United States, and that also includes BL. That includes one called Sasaki Yamiano, which is the first instance of BL being banned in the United States, to my knowledge. And it was banned in Florida. And it was banned on the aspects of that it encourages sexual orientation in schools and that it has obscene, explicit materials. Sasaki Miyano is a rated T for teen. There is no explicit sexual materials in this story at all. But some of the complaints are basically that they don't believe that homosexuality should be promoted in schools and they should just leave it to the parents to talk about it. But at the same time, they said to replace Sasaki and Miyano, they should have stories like Chainsaw Man instead because it's less obscene. And if you know Chainsaw Man is literally Denji turning into the Chainsaw Devil. And then Sasaki Amino is literally Sasaki just panicking at the fact that he has a crush on a boy. I don't know which one's more obscene, you tell me. But I'll leave it at that because then I'll go on a rant. But now we can actually get to the like, what is boys love portion of it. So I'm going to give some definitions and some types of media that people like myself engage with, and then just like the means of engagement, which includes TikTok. So for definitions, I have 20 plus pages just in the thesis dedicated to definitions because it's so extensive, especially when you consider, how academics use the words and how people like myself use the words. This is just surface level for what I'm going to talk about today. But essentially, boys love, the thing I've been saying since the beginning. It's just stories surrounding a romance between two boys or two men, depending on their age. Shonen Ai is BL originating from the 1970s and the 1980s. If you were to ask some Fujin today, they would just say that's non-explicit materials, and they don't really talk about, it's being BL from the 1970s. Fujin, Fudanshi, Fujoshi is a person, a woman, a man who reads BL. Fujin is a new development in the world of BL definitions because it's a more it doesn't have gender attached to it. Because the original kanji for Fujoshi was lady, and then on 2chan, misogynist Japanese men didn't like the fact that women were engaging in this type of material, so they changed the kanji from Fujoshi with the lady kanji to fu to rotten, and called Fujoshi rotten woman for engaging in queer content. It has since been a reclaimed word, and we still use the kanji for rotten, when saying Fujoshi. And then like green flag man, red flag man, black flag man. This is gonna be like more towards like the Jinx portion of this because I have to like kind of like I don't want to like diminish what the men are doing in these stories, but like this is how like Fujin on like TikTok talk. So like green flag men are like unproblematic, red flag men are problematic, and then black flag men are like problematic, but just to a higher degree that I can't really share right now. But I share it in the thesis, so read it if you want to learn more. But I want to go through a quick timeline of BL starting in the 1970s and 1980s. And if you didn't know, BL is a subgenre of shoujo manga, actually. So in the 1970s and 1980s, we have the emergence of a group called the Year 24 group, which was a group of commercially successful women who started writing shoujo manga that explored topics like gender and like sexuality and like current political states. And because of that, they also started to explore queer relationships. However, the reason they started to explore queer relationships wasn't because they wanted to see queer representation necessarily. It was more so it was an escapism from like purity culture in Japan in the 1970s and 80s. Women were expected to, be mothers, bear children, and that's it. Any type of sexuality associated with them they're supposed to be pure entities. They're not supposed to be sexual beings. So then, in order to explore the sexuality that they were not able to explore, in the relationships, they went to Shonen Ai in order to do that. And so, in the 1970s, we have the first Shonen Ai in the Sunroom, and then we have the two most popular, commercially popular Shonen Ai, Kazutoki no Uta and The Heart of Thomas. In this era, we also get the notion of the Bishonen or beautiful boy. So like in the sunroom picture right there, like that's a Bishonen. That's what that looks like. And we also get this notion of by woman for woman because of the history of women coming to Shonen Ai to explore their sexual fantasies. And it was written predominantly by women. They use that as kind of a if you want to read BL, it's by women for women. This is a safe space for you to explore this type of stuff. And then we get to the 1990s, and then we get into Jojinshi, and this is kind of where the emergence of a word name. It's an acronym of yaoi called, and yaoi means no climax, no point, no meaning in English. And Jojinshis are essentially fan-made comics. Yaoi is a subgenre of Jojinshi, and it's basically just Jojinshi that is just like raunchy sexual material, essentially. And that with Shonen Ai was combined underneath this umbrella of BL, which is how we still use it today. In the 90s, we also had the first instance of discourse between a gay Japanese activist and Fujoshi. And the argument was basically that since BL wasn't for gay men and that it didn't really show the realities of gay men in society, that women shouldn't be reading it. He also said that women who read it should die. So that was kind of an overreaction on his part. But also the women defended themselves saying that, BL isn't about gay men, it's about us. So you don't even have you shouldn't even be talking to us about this. It doesn't deal with you. So that happened during the 70s. And it was really crazy. But we should also note that during this time, China and Korea were also getting these shonenai and yaoi materials through unofficial means and scanlations and stuff. And they were starting to build their own markets, their own BL markets. That didn't really happen here in the United States. We don't really have a BL market, but huge in China, huge in Korea. And that brings us to what types of medias we engage in now. So essentially, we have novels, we have Korean webtoons, and then we have print media, which I think of just like manga, manhwa, and then we have dramas. Essentially, if you are a Fujoshi on the internet, you are going to interact with all of these materials all at once. Of course, people have their preferences. Personally, I don't watch dramas. I don't have an attention span for it. But I read the novels, I read the webtoons, I read the print media. And for Fujin to talk about this online, we usually categorize things by country of origin and by the publisher. So for Japanese BL, you say, do you have any Japanese BL recs? No, I don't really read Japanese BL, but do you have Korean BL recs? You'll see that commonly. And for Korean BL and Japanese BL, in terms of how it gets published here in English in the US, it's fairly different. And because Korean BL has less, is quicker in coming to the US, Korean BL has had a huge boom, especially since 2020 during COVID. So for Korean BLs, usually they are published in a site like Lezen. So Lezen's the one with the little dog in the red. Lezen publishes that in Korean, but it also at the same time, if it's a global release, publishes it in English at the same time. So we can read it the same time Korean audiences are reading it. However, in terms of Japanese BL, they don't really do the global releases anymore or have ever done global releases. So usually they get published in a BL manga magazine. If it's popular enough, it gets put into one volume. And if that gets popular enough, then it gets a translation to here in the United States where we can do a print or they can do an EPUB. Another difference is that fact that Korean BL, usually we do not get EPUBs until they do a print of the webtoon. And that is what makes it a little harder for audiences because they don't own the rights of the BL that they purchase when they purchase Korean BL. And then we have Chinese danmei, which is really great. And it's like a regular novel. So Chinese danmei published in China, get translated here, and then we get it in English. It's a little different as well because China has way stricter laws about explicit materials. So we over here do get access to the materials, while in China they don't always get access to all of the materials. And I should mention this as well. Recently, within the past couple of years, there's been a increase in danmei authors getting arrested in China because they are profiting off of the explicit material of danmei novels. My understanding, they can publish it, but they can't make money off of it. So when they find out that they're making money off of it, they give them really high fees and they throw them in prison, which is really sad. And something else I talk about in the thesis. I also do age rating systems. I talk more about this in the thesis. I just wanted this as a visual to show that BL has so many different age ranges and it different depending on the publisher. So there's this misconception, especially from anti-Fujos, that all BL is sexual when that's not the case at all, and that there's some great, all ages 15 plus, ages 13 plus BL. Here are some examples. I love Our Dining Table. It's one of the most wholesome BLs I've ever seen in my life. And then Lost in the Cloud, it talks more about, sexuality and character identity, but it doesn't have any explicit scenes, while the other two on the end do have explicit scenes. QJJ, Ballad of Swan and Wine, one of my favorite animes. I highly recommend it. I couldn't help myself. Now I have to talk more about myself, which honestly I didn't want to do, if I'm being completely honest, because I'm exposing myself really hard here. Um, so I started reading BL around 2014, when I was like 12 years old. I'm not going to get into that. I get into that in my thesis though, if you want to read more about that. But essentially, I started with Ultimate Games, and Ultimate Games are romance visual novels from Japan where you self-insert yourself into a game and like romance like a man. Like I was so obsessed with these when I was a kid. Like I didn't like socializing at all. So sometimes my parents would like bribe me with Google Play cards to like go out, and I would use that money to buy these games. And it was like some of the happiest moments of my life to get these my hands on these, because they're just so fun and they're like so badly written. Now that I've been here, like I've like played some, and like the romance is so bad, but it makes it so good. So highly recommend if you have like $4 to spare on some of these. But then I have to get into my pipeline. My pipeline of getting into BL is actually ridiculous. And I want to emphasize this because many Fujin do not start out reading BL. They start out in other fandoms and other parts of the internet, and then they eventually get here. All of the stars, BL. You will find yourself at BL if you try hard enough. So that's why I want to mention in the research. I can't go through all of this. I hope you can see like most of it, but like the pink is essentially my way, but like everything else happening on the screen happened within 2014 to 2018. So like I go to Ultimate Games, and then I go to anime, and then from anime I go to like fan fiction. And then if you're in fan fiction, you're automatically gonna go to BL. But also I also went to like anime YouTube, and if like like Joey the anime man, like he had a friend, I think girlfriend now, Aki Dearest, Fujo. She taught me what the word Fujoshi means. So she introduced me to that. And then she introduced me to a game called Dramatical Murder, which is too much to unpack right now. But that game is crazy for a 12-year-old to be looking at. Just because it's just crazy. But I unpacked that in the thesis as well. But you're gonna get from Dramatical Murder to BL anime, or you're going to go to fan fiction of Dramatical Murder. Well, that will lead you to BL manga. So like you will end up there somehow. And then like K-pop as well. K-pop to BL like pipeline is so easy. So I won't explain that, but I will later. And so now we're gonna like talk about like what I was originally planning to do with the thesis before like I lost the plot and decided to talk about everything else I talked about before this. So essentially, I wanted to look at power dynamics found in BL, and essentially how people interpret characters in there, and like how do they make their decisions about characters, whether they're a green flag, a red flag, a black flag, and it's all dependent on these power dynamics. And so let me just give a little definition of what power dynamics are. It's basically an balance or imbalance of power between two people when engaging in one another. They're used in BL. It's not exclusive to BL, but it's a driving point for narrative and plot and for character depth and growth. These are not the same as romantic, like relationship dynamics or like relationship tropes, which if you were on Tumblr, yes. So basically it's like the chaotic and the dumb one, like the loud one and the quiet one. Like those are like relationship dynamics. These are different than like what I'm talking about with power dynamics, and you'll see that in a second. So I have a total of 7 total power dynamics that I go through and kind of apply to BL. So we have mutual social, we have a catbird seat, first of all, secondary gender power dynamics, specialty verse power dynamics, if you know, you know, and then financial power dynamics. And sometimes there's an absence of power dynamics. And I'm gonna go through them a little bit because I don't have much time, unfortunately. But first we have mutual social power dynamics. So these mutual social power dynamics are basically the amount of influence character A has on the thoughts, beliefs, opinions, and behaviors of character B based on each other's perception to a singular entity or their status and perception to society and or their community. So first we have Lost in the Cloud by Paskim. And this story is about Skylar, who has a crush on his friend Chanel. And he takes secret photos of Chanel. It's not weird. It's kind of cute and endearing, but he's just a little weird about it. And he takes photos of him. One day he puts it in like his like cloud drive on the computer at school, and he gets called out of the room. And then Cyrus here comes into the room, sees that the file is open, sees it belongs to Skylar, and then the story continues from there. But their mutual social power dynamic is essentially that they're both friends with Chanel. So Chanel is what connects them in this. And mutual social power dynamics are usually with other power dynamics playing at the same time. So because Cyrus knows about the photos, we have a catbird seat power dynamic, which is essentially character A has an influence on character B because of character A's status. So Cyrus's status at this point is the fact that he has a flash drive full of the photos of Chanel, and he uses it as blackmail on Skylar. And because of that, their story continues. And that's how their power dynamic plays, and that's how people interpret their relationship, either as like a toxic one or like a non-toxic one. We also have another way of mutual social dynamics, and that is based off just the two's social roles when compared to another, and there's not much of an emphasis on the role. So for Joo-hyuk and Shihyun in Beta Off Not Dating, their mutual social relationship is the fact that Shihyun is Joo-hyuk's boss because Shihyun is the director of the company, while Shihyun is only like a team member. So that's just the basic, like the bones of their relationship. However, it starts to move because Shihyun has a crush on Joo-hyuk, and he had a crush on Joo-hyuk first. So first of all, power dynamics are essentially when character A, who falls in love with character B, is bounded and by the pace in which character B develops their own romantic feelings towards character A. So Shihyun has to kind of navigate how to show his interest to Joo-hyuk, but he can't outwardly show all of that interest or else Joo-hyuk will leave. But if he doesn't show any interest, Joo-hyuk won't develop his own feelings towards Shihyun. So it's a little dance. And if you see the title and see the word beta, you might see what's coming. This is an Omegaverse story. Omegaverse, I wish I had time to go through this, but I do in the thesis, and it's absolutely wonderful. But in the Omegaverse, there's essentially a second gender assigned to people. So you have your, male, female, non-binary, and then you have alpha, beta, omega. And every single time I mention the Omegaverse, I have to say the Omegaverse is the world is your oyster. When you are writing the Omegaverse, you can make it to anything you want. There's so many different dynamics I go through in the thesis. But for now, for Joo-hyuk, he's a beta. So he's like you and us. Like we don't really have any second genders, and that's basically what being a beta is. Being an alpha is like being at the top of society. They are usually the CEOs. They're usually the dominant ones. And then being an omega is usually, I say usually, but I can't really say usually because, people make it on their own. But essentially, alphas and omegas are usually the ones being coupled together because of specialty versus power dynamics that I can't get into now. But essentially, in Beta Off No Dating, Joo-hyuk, a beta, is sexist against Shihyun's secondary gender. He doesn't think that betas and alphas should be in relationships together, nor does he believe in wanting to be in a relationship right now because he hates ABO society. Which is why I mentioned it in the thesis, because it kind of makes fun of all this dynamic. And it's easy to explain this dynamic when you have someone who hates it and can pinpoint every single aspect of the dynamic that they don't like. And so it's because of that this first of all dynamic is a lot harder because Shihyun knows that Joo-hyuk is sexist against his secondary gender, so he has to kind of navigate that. And then we get to know power dynamics. This is really rare because usually power dynamics are used to use for plot. But for this Dawn May Run Wild, for the first volume at least, there's not really a power dynamic like the ones I've seen because they're just teenage boys going through it. They had a rough life. But at the end of the first volume, well, spoiler for Run Wild, end of the first volume, Jun Chung, the MC, kisses Gu Mao on the cheek when they're accidentally drunk. And so I'm thinking it's going to be a first of all power dynamic on Jun Chung liking Gu Fei and Gu Fei not reciprocating that right away. I don't know. It comes out this month, and I'm really excited about that. And then lastly, and then I get into Jinx, the financial power dynamic is basically character A has influences on the thoughts, beliefs, opinions, and behaviors of character B due to their financial status. Money turns into a social power dynamic due to the character's actions when money is a factor in their story. So in Jinx, I have to explain. The synopsis of Jinx is basically Joo Jae-kyung is a really powerful and successful MMA fighter, and he has this Jinx where if he doesn't have sex before a match, he will lose. And so he has to employ his physical therapist to have sex with him every single night in order to win his matches. Um, yeah, and I talk about this on TikTok. It's great. But essentially, their financial power dynamic is the fact that Jaehyun pays Dan $14,000 a month to do that, and Dan uses that money for his dying grandmother. And he's like debt ridden, like so much debt, loan shark debt. Like he's getting chased. He lives in a horrible place until Jaehyun finds him, and then he pays him money, and that's gonna go into Jinx Discourse, which was 6 months of tomfoolery on my end. It was so great. It was so fun. I do plan on continuing. I don't share my TikTok in this presentation. Just that was an executive decision. If you really want to know, come talk to me after. But essentially, this is the synopsis. I already talked about that. We have Jinx Discourse every 10 days because a new chapter comes out every 10 days. And so I'm going to talk about the latest Jinx Discourse is if did Jaehyun have the right to throw Dan out of a car and splash a bucket of water at him? Out of context, this seems ridiculous. But in the context of Jinx, it's just like another day of Jaehyun being a shitty person to Dan. So these are the panels of Jaehyun throwing Dan onto the ground and splashing water in his face. And even me talking about this out of context is going to make people mad on TikTok because I make people mad on TikTok with just my takes. And it's kind of it's funny at the same time because I also get subtweeted on Twitter. I hate Jinx Twitter with my whole soul. But I saw someone told me that someone was like subtweeting me on there and it was just like stupid. It's just stupid, but it was funny. It was really funny. But back to Discourse. Yeah, so we're talking about this like this week, and it was really fun. So they also have a mutual social power dynamic. Let's just move into the power dynamics that base my opinion on whether he had a right to do this. So basically, mutual social power dynamic. Jaehyun is Dan's boss. Catbird seat power dynamics. In this contract, Dan has to come running to Jaehyun anytime he calls him. If he doesn't do that, he gets no money. No money. His grandmother doesn't get the medical care that she needs. He can't pay off his debts, and he can't keep the loan sharks at bay. And then I already talked about the financial power dynamic. Things to consider about Dan when making opinions that like people fight about on TikTok is the fact that he's pushing 30 and that he doesn't look 30. But he's like a 29-year-old man. Jaehyun is younger than him, so the fact that someone younger than him is like being like abusive to him is kind of crazy. It's the fact also that Jaehyun had an injury. The injury that Jaehyun sustained before these scenes was really bad on his part, and Dan blamed himself for that. But that's just because he was blackmailed into like being blamed for that. And like he didn't really have a choice, and he was just like, "Wow, Jaehyun, he like the best fighter in the world. He was injured because of me. I have to leave." So he ran away. So he left Seoul to be his like grandma's physical therapist at some like rinky-dink like hospital. And then in this small town, he has no friends, he has no family. His grandma is dying. He is utterly alone. Dan has no one, and this is also a point of contention on the writing of Jinx because I feel like, I will say it. I feel like Minghua put him into a corner because he has no friends, no family to like help him. He's just alone. So the only person to help him is Jaehyun, and I will get to that with the bucket of water thing. Oh, also, sub note, he has a history with substance abuse because of the like the debt and like, the fact his grandmother is dying. And he ran away, and now Jaehyun like hunted him down in order to bring him back to Seoul for the Jinx because they still have that contract. And it's only become worse since Jaehyun has come. That's a controversial take as well. I won't get into that. But things to also consider about Jaehyun is that he blamed Dan for the injury at first, but now he knows it wasn't Dan's fault. But he's still mean to Dan about it every single time. He has anxiety about getting back into the ring, which is why he needs Dan for the Jinx, because he feels like he can't win if he doesn't have sex before a match, apparently. Also, abusive towards Dan through the Jinx contract. I talk about that way more in my thesis. I literally cannot even mention it. One, the things he does is like red flag to like I won't call him a black flag because I'll get yelled at if I do say that. But he's very much in red flag territory with the way he treats Dan, physically, emotionally, mentally. He treats him as a tool. He doesn't see him as a person. Also, that's a hot take on my end because I get yelled at about it every 10 days about it. But he also has like low emotional self-regulation and like emotional ineptness. And like apparently he's getting better because he didn't interrupt his coach about a upcoming match. I don't see that as development. Some people do. And he needs, Dan to win in his head. So the main arguments that I have been discussing, well, that I discussed on Jinx Day, when a chapter comes out, it's Jinx Day, so everyone's online. Is that, the question was Jae Kyung the person to like, was it right of him to throw him out of a car and throw a bucket of water on him? Some people say yes, because Dan needs a wake up call because he's abusing alcohol again and he's being self destructive to his body. Dan is 30 years old and is in the medical field, so he should know that he shouldn't be abusing alcohol. Dan has no one, so Jae Kyung is the only person to do it for him. The first part of this, I don't like it that people are saying that just because you're 30 years old doesn't means that you should know. Like, just because he's 30 doesn't mean like he's not an alcoholic. Like, people who are 30 and alcoholics also need help. So it's like I don't get that argument at all. Just because he's in the medical field, he's a physical therapist. He doesn't deal with like substance abuse, so I don't know what that is about. I get the one thing I do get is the fact that Jae Kyung is the only person to do this for him because Minghwa is the person who writes Jinx, by the way. Minghwa has written Dan in a sense that Jae Kyung is the only person that Dan knows that can help him because again, emphasis on the dying grandmother. Jae Kyung knows about the dying grandmother. He funds the dying grandmother's like hospital care, and he even talks and he takes advantage of the fact that Dan's grandmother is dying by having a personal relationship with the grandmother a couple of times. Not really. It's just like he talks to her a couple of times to get to know Dan, not in a weird way. Moving on. But the last argument is that no, Jae Kyung hasn't been abusive to Dan since the beginning of the relationship. He has no right to be a wake-up call because he has contributed to the fact that Dan is abusing alcohol. And that's what my opinion is. Because Jae Kyung, and I lay this out more in the thesis, it's just every single instance of them interacting with each other, Jae Kyung is mean and he's rude and he's condescending and he doesn't see Dan as a person. But in this, world of Jinx right now, I have people telling me that Jae Kyung is in love with Dan at this point in time. I sincerely do not believe that at all. And it's another aspect of the thesis that I go into. How do I apply this in like a full way? Is it just me like ranting about my TikTok like beef? No. I just go and do literary theory and apply literary views to this. So in my perspective of the 6 months, I kind of apply reader response theory to the way people interpret this. And I also apply extreme intentionalism. So basically, I'll start with extreme intentionalism because extreme intentionalism is basically when people do not consider their own reading experience, they only consider the author's want for the story. So Minghwa has said that eventually Jae Kyung and Dan will get together, that we'll have a happy ending. So people at this point in time think that, all of this isn't good. It's in good fun. Like it'll be fine because at the end of the day, they're going to get together. It doesn't really matter if he's abusive now or if the writing is good because at the end of the day, Minghwa said that they're going to have a happy ending. So that's fine. Then reader response theory is like people like me who actively like make an opinion every single time we read it. And we don't really take into account Minghwa's wants for the series. And as I said multiple times, I go through with this more in the thesis, but this is basically the two perspectives that are on TikTok and like how I kind of like divvy the different types of discourse. Closing thoughts, because I've been yapping for so hard. But essentially, I hope this gives you kind of a little insight into, Fujoshi culture. This is not the intended audience, but I really do hope that, fandom fandom in general is just so funny, and I'm sure some people have engaged in fandom in here and understand some of the frustrations that I have in this. But I hope at the end of the day to, academics and to other Fujin like myself who really want to like understand the content that they're reading, that they look at this thesis and they see, okay, maybe this is something I've never like thought about before. Maybe I can change my perspective a little bit, and sometimes they won't do that at all, and they'll just think you're crazy. But nothing you can do about that. Thank you. And if there are any questions at all, I'm an open book.
Um, I- with this particular discourse, I'm curious, is there an aspect of translation with the author's intent?
That's one thing. I wish I had this panel up. There was one scene recently where Jaekyung and Dan were in the bath together, and Jaekyung was going like through his like mental state of like, I need to keep Dan at arm's length and like never release this man from my from my hands. And essentially, people who were reading the Korean and were saying like the way Jaekyung was like saying this didn't put enough emphasis on the way that like they said that it makes Jaekyung see Dan in a way that's more of a person rather than a tool for the Jinx. While in the English translation, it's very clear to me at least that he still sees Dan as a tool. So it's really funny when people do like introduce like, oh, the Korean says this and the English says this, because it's like, which one do we take as canon then? Like, which one do we say, okay, if the Korean is like this, do we just automatically assume that this is the better one? Or do we just assume that, the English is better because we're the ones reading it? We're the ones reading it in English, so we have to take what we get. So it's a part of discourse that I don't really talk about much in the thesis just because it's so nuanced, but it is a part of discourse that I have seen on TikTok.
Why did you choose Jinx specifically? Like, were you reading it before, or have you been like hearing a lot about it and then we're like, I have to feel what's going on?
Yes, I was okay. In the thesis, I also talk about Mingwa's other story called BJ Alex, which is essentially Jinx is BJ Alex 2.0. And essentially I was reading that, I completed that, and then Jinx came out and everyone was like, wow, BJ Alex was so great. And I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot as well. Um, I can say with confidence, Jinx is the most polarizing like BL I have seen in like the past like 10 years, just because of how much discourse is like talked about with Jae Kyung and how he treats Dan. I only started I did I start at the beginning? I did start at the beginning. I started when like chapters were coming out. So like chapter one, chapter two, chapter three. We're at season two right now. So I have been reading since like every 10 days for like the publishing schedule. But I also have to take in consideration when I'm talking about this that some people are going to be able to binge read this. So if they binge read it, they're going to have a different experience of Jae Kyung being shitty to Dan than me having to wait every 10 like days to see how like the progression of him being mean to him. And so if you're reading it all in bulk, then it's just like, oh, like, okay, he was mean then, he was mean then, he was mean then, but it's all condensed. So it doesn't seem as bad if you read it in bulk versus if you read it like every 10 days.
That's culture surrounding Jinx compared to the culture around killing, stalking.
Oh my gosh.
Especially colors.
I was reading Killing Stalking like back in 2016. So like the culture, okay, because there's like the culture of Killing Stalking in 2016, and then the culture of Killing Stalking in 2020 when it blew up on like TikTok and whatnot. Um, I don't really remember the culture in 2016 just because I was so young and I wasn't in a lot of Fujin spaces at that time. But I remember in 2020, especially, I wish I found tweets of myself from 2020 talking about Killing Stalking. And I remember distinctly participating in anti-yaoification of Killing Stalking because I don't consider it to be a BL. Because where's the romance in someone stalking someone, breaking their ankles, and like hiding them in the basement? Um, for a little bit, and all the obscene things that happen in Killing Stalking. I do talk about it a little bit in the thesis, but in terms of like Fujoshi culture and like just attitudes around it, it was definitely it's definitely a little different as well, just because of the fact that, Fujoshi culture in 2016, I, I can't like describe it besides like being like cringe, but being like good cringe. And the fact that like people were so unapologetic of like making this into a romance series. Um, from your memory is always so unreliable. And in my mind, I never remembered it being tagged as BL, especially since the author says that, the main character who does a lot of the abusing is straight. And the character has a really iconic speech bubble that says I'm not gay. So like I don't know how it couldn't be more clear than that. That how is this a BL if one of the characters is not queer of any sort. Um, it's just it's just really hard to pinpoint like why people would think it is like a BL versus like why people do think it is a BL, because they just have like romance for romantic sake versus like actually looking at the story. Um, and it's just really nuanced. I wish I could talk more about it.
I have another question.
Mhm.
This is more just like a fulfilling question for me because I don't really know anything about BL. Yesterday, I thought they had to have sex for it to be BL, but
Oh,
so that's why I wanted to ask if you would consider like banana fish to be a BL because I know
that
it's
is a good
JoJo.
question. Oh my god. Banana Fish is such a. We have to remember that Banana Fish was made in the 1980s, I believe. So this was the era of Shonen Ai. So it's a little different from like BL today because one, the romantic relationship between Ash and Edgy isn't really disclosed until the side chapters for like with like Edgy. Well, spoiler for Banana Fish. Ash, the main character, dies at the end, which is very reminiscent of what a lot of Shonen Ai at the time did, is like doomed yaoi in the sense that one of the characters will die at the end. That's what happened in Kazetsuki no Uta. That's what happened in The Heart of Thomas. One of the characters died at the end. So it's kind of following that path. And I feel like a lot of people do use Banana Scandal as like one of those BLs is like it's not sexual, so like it's like better than a lot of other BLs, which also brings me. I'm gonna bring this to the present a little bit with the Heartstopper incident with I forget their name, but the author of a popular queer Western comic had some comments resurface from 2016, which basically said that Heartstopper isn't a BL, which it follows the relationship between two like teenage boys. They said that Heartstopper isn't a BL because it doesn't fetishize queer men and it's not sexual. So basically, they were implying that all BL was sexual and fetishized queer men when, like, Sasuke Amino is like one of the examples that I always give to people who say like, BL is bad because it sexualizes like boys. Sasuke Amino doesn't have any sort of sexualization in it because that's just the nature of the story. It's just a lighthearted BL. So when they like use like examples like Banana Fish, like Sasaki Miyano. Sometimes it just, I also have to preface, I also have been seeing the rise of purity culture within fandom spaces itself, because a lot of younger audiences who are interacting with adults in these spaces are saying because something is sexual, you shouldn't be reading it. And it's really polarizing because I remember in like 2014, being a minor in this space, reading this type of content, I wouldn't engage with anyone about it. And there was like an unspoken rule that you don't engage with adults like with this type of stuff. So the fact that like people like minors engaging in this kind of content when they shouldn't, and then they're telling adults who can engage in this kind of type of content to not engage in that type of content at all, and that their type of content is worse than content that like doesn't have explicit material. It's very weird, and it's a trend that's just like it's developing. So I'm like keeping a close eye on it. But even other fandom spaces have been like experiencing that. And that's such a long-winded answer for like what you said, but that just goes to show how much I yap about this.
Could you say a little bit more about just the last 5 years? So since 2020, when you're
Oh yeah.
identifying the boom.
Yeah, the
how
BL
it's
boom.
related to the kind of this change.
Yeah, so like I feel like a lot of people can relate to the fact that once they went to like once like 2020 like peak COVID happened, they went on TikTok for a little bit. And on TikTok, there's like you had a lot of people come into fandom spaces in which that previously they would thought would be cringe. So like a lot of people came into like anime fandom spaces, had was like, oh wait, this is actually pretty cool. Like kind of sorry for making fun of you like a couple of years ago. And then they were be in these fandom spaces from like 2020, I would say 2022. And then sometimes it was just a phase for some people. And then they would come out and they'd be like, wow, me watching anime in 2020, super cringe, dog. And so in terms of BL, usually people like, let's go to the pipeline real quick. People who like engage in anime will end up at BL if they try hard enough. So like for me, okay, I will out myself a little bit. For me, like with like sports anime, I got into like sports anime like really late, but I also like knew about it like in the 2014 era. So like for me personally, like I was like really watching like Free Iwatobi Swim Club, if anyone knows that. And I was like a really big like shipper of like two of the characters in that. And then I found other people who did like just get into anime. We started watching that, and then we started reading like reading fan fiction. And then from fan fiction, you're gonna end up at BL because then you find out that there's doujinshi of the three boys together. So it's just the BL boom is essentially just when everyone from these like different like spaces came to TikTok, especially, and then they just started sharing and talking with people because TikTok is such a like I, I don't want to say it's like the greatest app on ever, but like it's been like really influential to like the BL community, especially because one, you get your recommendations for BL on there, you get your community on there, and then you get discourse like the Jinx discourse to have a fruitful conversation on there. And you know, TikTok ban happened a couple what it's been like in January, I think, and I lost my community within in a split second. Like I had no one else to talk to because I refused to go on Twitter. So it's like I just lost my entire community in an instant, and then we were all panicking. Everyone was following each other in different like social media apps, and then it came back, and then we had an extension. That extension came up, and now we have another extension. So it's just like every single time we're like having like to like wait like we're under pressure of our like community being like taken away from us, which is something very different from before 2020 because all of these fandoms were very like niche parts of the internet that no one really touched. And especially like with like Tumblr, I wasn't really on Tumblr, but like there was a big like BL community on Tumblr. And like if you're on Tumblr, which is like really like a fandom dedicated website, you're gonna interact with all other fandom as well. On TikTok, I don't really find people interacting with other fandoms because TikTok has an algorithm where if you just like one video and it's about BL, it's just gonna put your feed of all BL videos. And so you kind of just enter these echo chambers of fandom on TikTok, where on like Tumblr, like I was on Tumblr for a little bit, so I understand what like the DashCon ball pit was, if anyone knows what that is. So like I knew about that from being in like these little niche BL spaces because it was such a monumental moment for Tumblr and like the community of Tumblr as a whole. I don't really feel there's a fandom community of TikTok as a whole, which is also like some like a little polarizing, but I also get it because of the algorithm. And sometimes it's good because sometimes I do just want to have BL recommendations on my For You page. But at the same time, I also want to be exposed to like, you know, maybe get some K-pop on my page that like I haven't listened to since like 2018. Maybe get back into Mystic Messenger for a little bit and wake up at 2 a.m. for fake phone calls. Like there's so much that like I have experienced in fandom that if like before 2020, I would be able to easily go back to these fandoms and go experience that again. But on TikTok, I can't. So it's like a double-edged sword of like once you're in a fandom, you'll be really into that fandom with the echo chambers and the algorithm that provides so much content for you. But at the same time, you don't have the option to go through any of these pipelines and to experience more like niche internet culture. So it's just like that's what 2020 has kind of taught me and what I've been seeing. since like till today. And a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, people are now trying to go to other apps in order to find these like dedicated fandom spaces like Blue Sky, but like Blue Sky really hasn't taken off. Then there's like Threads on Instagram that really hasn't taken off as well because so many people are ingrained in these like in like Twitter. And like they can't leave because, especially in terms of BL, because a lot of the BL mangaka and the Korean BL creators are like so used to being on Twitter, and that's how you interact with them. So it's just that's a long-winded answer, but that's those are aspects of the BL boom I'm seeing, and I'm like documenting that I hope to document, and that I hope a lot of Fujin take into account and not take for granted that these spaces can easily go away with like the snap of a finger.
Good. I have a lot of questions about Jake Young and the grandmother. I'll put that aside for now. This is great. This is so interesting. I'm learning so much from you. I can't follow a lot of this chart. I clearly I need to read my way through it. I need to do. For the power dynamics,
Yeah.
is that are these categories that you're creating? Are you borrowing from somewhere? Where did these come from?
I created them, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were like aspects of that. I didn't really look up like power dynamics. I just kind of said, oh, these are power dynamics I see, and I made them.
Yeah, so these
So
are your categories.
yeah,
And
your research though too.
yeah.
I mean, I guess I have a follow-up kind of to the translation question
Mhm.
in that I'm wondering, it's kind of a two-parter.
Yeah.
What is the awareness on the part of the creators of your communities that you're involved in?
That is such a great question.
Do they know the power they have in other places? Are they catering to you, or?
It's really hard because a lot of times when Anglophone fandoms are engaging with the creators, it's due to the fact that the creators found out that their work is being stolen and putting on scanlation sites, and then they have to post in English like stop reading this on that site and like support me through this link if you can. And it's really sad sometimes to see that. But recently, and I put this in my thesis, recently there was an incident with a Japanese mangaka who, and it's a good incident, who wrote a story, and it's like of older people. They're in their 40s. If you're in your 40s, that categorizes as old man yaoi. So a lot of like people over here, there's a really popular Twitter account that was like, hey, everyone go support this. Go support this mangaka. They have really good manga. And so someone oh man, yaoi. And so the popular Twitter account was like, yeah, this is old man yaoi. And so the creator of the manga was like, what's old man yaoi? Like I'm not making yaoi, because yaoi in like terms of like Japan is like fan fiction, and it was a self-published work. It was a original work that was commercialized, so they were really confused about that. And then there was a whole thing where like that Twitter account was like, it's a good thing, people love old man yaoi, and like the creator was like, okay, great, like I'll go talk to my publishers to see if we can get this English translated. And so that was an experience. I think it is getting English translated now. And there was even a photo at a Kinokuniya of someone like putting like the manga cover on there and being like, sorry, this is not like, we don't have this old man yaoi yet. You're gonna have to wait. So sometimes there are good like experiences like that kind of like cross like with the mangaka, because there's the translation barrier, especially on Twitter. It's not when you like write in English and you translate it, it's not always going to be correct in like what you want to say. But most of the times, especially with the Korean, now I'm thinking about it, a lot of the Korean BL creators turn off their comments. So you can't really interact with them at all as well, which I do find interesting. And I haven't really looked into it, and that's just a thought that popped up. But yeah, the relationship between creator and foreign fan is it's either really good or it's really bad. Like there's no in between. Like you can't have a regular conversation like talking about like, yeah, I really liked it, because then they don't really see that on their thing.
Okay, so here's the second part of it. I mean, you're talking about reader response criticism, and the readers are creating things,
Yeah.
as they read it.
Yeah.
And then you've got these power dynamics,
Yeah.
and you discussed it here in the presentation, pretty much as a power dynamics within the work.
Yeah.
Okay, are you part of that power dynamic
As the reader.
as a reader?
Ooh.
Because I mean, you're telling me that there are people who are in a catbird position,
Yeah.
who have knowledge, and knowledge is power,
Yeah.
and are creating this story. And I'm just wondering if there's a way in which those two threads combine, in which you as the foreign reader have some sort of creative control that maybe doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I think the first thing that does pop into my mind is something that I could talk about here, but I talk about it in my thesis. It's called the run and grovel, which is a narrative strategy used in BL that Jinx is supposed to follow through like extreme intentionalism. So essentially, the run and grovel is when you have character A who is really mean to character B, so Ju Jae-kyung, very mean to Dan. Dan is going to eventually stand up for himself and say, "Hey, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this abuse," and he's gonna leave. Then we're supposed to have like Jae-kyung's like reflection arc of where he's like, "Wait, I kind of was mean to Dan. Maybe I shouldn't have done that." And then he goes and chases. So that's the running part. And with like Western fans and with like I don't know much about like Korean fans because I don't interact with Korean fans, nor do I done a lot of research about Korean fans when it comes to Jinx discourse. But people do like use their own background of like reading a lot of BL as like, well, one, if they read BJ Alex, which is Minghwa's previous work that did have a run and grovel, they're going to be like, well, Minghwa loves the run and grovel like trope and like narrative strategy, so of course she's going to do it again. And then because they think that Minghwa said she's going to do it again, so they're going to follow extreme intentionalism instead of having reader response theory, because they're just going to trust Minghwa that she's going to provide a story that she said that she's going to provide. While like people like me who are like, we're like 69 chapters in and this man is still being like very like mean. I don't see this developing anywhere. I can't really trust Minghwa right now, although I like love her work. I think she's like her art is amazing. It's like a beautiful. I just think the story is a little stale right now because I read a previous run and grovel story called Banana Scandal. It would not be me if I did not promote Banana Scandal, which is my favorite BL of all time. That does have like the best run and grovel I have ever seen in my life. It's so good. It's so amazing. Oh, just thinking about it just brings me it's so good. But like it's like those moments, the fact that I can like gush about Banana Scandal and be like, well, Minghwa's not really doing a good job at this run and grovel. And some people are like, have never read Banana Scandal before, which is so sad. Read Banana Scandal. Some people haven't read Banana Scandal, so they don't really know what to expect from this run and grovel. And they can't really make their own opinion about this run and grovel. So they can't really follow this reader response theory of like, I've seen previous examples of this run and grovel done, so I am going to kind of compare and contrast them and see like, is this kind of working? Is this not kind of working? What do I prefer in the run and grovel? Well, if they don't have any experience, they're just going to have to be like, okay, Minghwa said that at the end, Jae-kyun and Dan are going to be together. And through that time, Jae-kyun is going to have to grovel really, really hard to get Dan back. So if she said that, they just kind of have to trust it at that point. I don't think that reader response theory on its own is good. I don't think that extreme intentionalism on its own is good. I think if you really want to engage in this text, especially something like Jinx, you should have a fusion of the two. You should take what Minghwa says into account because, at the end of the day, it's her story. She is going to write the story she wants to write, and we're going to pay for it. I pay for it every single 10 days, even though I complain about it every 10 days. And so like she has us in a chokehold because of this, and it's so great. And like she's so powerful that she's able to have, people like us like discuss it every single week, every 2 weeks.
And that's what makes it your story.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's
it can be hers and it can be yours.
Yeah. So that's why it's like the
Yeah.
fusion of everything.
Yeah.
And it's really great to participate in it. As like I don't want this to be like I hate Jinx. I hate being on BL TikTok. I hate doing discourse. I love doing it. It brings me life. Like it puts me on my toes. Sometimes people ask questions and I'm like, maybe I didn't consider this. Like someone on my timeline, it was a good moot of mine, said that maybe, Jake Young has some like characteristics of like OCD, and that like that's why some of the actions he does, it explains, it does not justify, which I should also say. That is a really important factor because I never really thought of Jake Young having OCD tendencies, but some of my moots who do have OCD are like, yeah, I can kind of relate to some of these experiences that he has had and that he has shown. So then it's like, now I should reconsider this fact. Is Mingwa gonna put that in the story? I don't know. I don't know because at this point it's a theory because she hasn't said anything much about Jaehyun's emotional state. We don't even have his backstory, which is the number one piece of discourse right now is the fact that we don't know anything about Jaehyun, his home life, his past, but we know everything about Dan. He doesn't have parents. He grew up with his grandma. He has riddled with debt. He went to college, but then the beginning of Jinx is essentially Dan getting fired from his office job, not his office job, his job at the hospital because a senior doctor sexually assaulted him and he had to leave because everyone didn't believe him when he like reported it, which is like crazy for one, especially in the story, and it's like really serious. But then we don't talk about it again, and it's like, why don't we talk about it again? Like, why doesn't Minghua like expand on this, like men getting sexually assaulted and not being believed? Will she like expand on the future? We don't know, and so we also have to consider maybe Jae Kyun has also had some experience, either through sexual violence or like abuse from his parents, and that's why he's so like crappy. And again, that doesn't justify, that just explains. And so we just have to wait. It's such a waiting game, and that's what makes discourse so fun but also so like irritating at the same time because we just have to wait every 10 days for like more information to come out. And like when you're waiting 10 days, like okay, last example before I stop yapping. There was one chapter where like Dan and Jaekyung came in the same like room, and like they were like, Jaekyung was basically like, have sex with me, Dan, and Dan was like, I'm only your tool, so I guess I'll just do it one last time and I'll dip, which is like standing on business on Dan's part. So then that happens, and like that's a full chapter. So I'm waiting 10 days for them to establish that they're gonna do Boombaya. I don't want Boombaya, I want a conversation, which is why I titled it that. They have to wait 10 days for them just to have sex for like a chapter, and then I gotta wait another 10 days and spend 40 coins for them to also have sex for another chapter, because sometimes it's 2 chapters of them just having sex. And I don't want to watch that. I want them to talk to each other. So that's why I get irritated and so animated like this, because I just have to deal with it. Because I do this to myself. I could easily drop the series and not think about it again, but I can't. I'm just addicted. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one more thing. Have you seen the TV show Severance?
No, I have not.
Okay, I feel like you're gonna be happy to know that there's this ship and this relationship between two characters, and they're both like 70-year-old men. So on Twitter, it's just old man yaoi.
I
The
love
term
old man
yaoi is used all the time, and I didn't know it was like a term until now. So I was like, my old man yaoi.
Old man yaoi on top. I love the dynamic so much. So great.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so, yeah, go ahead. Where can we read your thesis? Yeah.
Oh, I'm just gonna I'm not gonna physically publish it like through like a publisher or anything. I'm just gonna put it in a Google Doc in like a Google Drive file and just put it out to the world, because a lot of my TikTok mutuals do want to read it. And to the mutuals on Zoom, like, thank you so much. Hi, I didn't really say anything to you. Like, thank you so much. Like, you guys are great. Like, I can't wait to talk to you about it and like post about it and post this and later. But just know I acknowledge you. Thank you as well. But yeah, I'll just post it on a link. And if, I don't know, Professor Strand, if you want to distribute that, you can.
Yeah, I can help you out with that. Well, thank you so much. This
Yeah.
was a really nice